Namo Phat. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The second mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and learn ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I will practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. I'm determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. I will respect the property of others, but I will prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species on earth. For Dharma lessons, we're now reading Ajahn Amaro's book, Catastrophe Apostrophe, and we're in the chapter on Before We Begin. The very core, the source code of the process of dependent origination is the law of specific conditionality, idappaccayata in Pali, as is described in the quotation above. The Pali word for ida means in this or here. Paccaya means conditioned or affected by. The suffix ta means the quality of or ness. Idappaccayata thus means the quality of having its foundation in this, being causally connected like this, being by way of cause or conditioned by thisness. In essence, it is a process whereby one thing affects another. In the passage above from the scriptures, it can be summarized as, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. The 12 links of the classical recension of dependent origination are cast in the form of one thing conditioning the next. They affect each other. But the exact way in which each of the 12 links affects the others can vary. One of the most important distinctions in that way of affecting or conditioning is that it can be either sequentially in time or synchronically, that is, concurrently, simultaneously. An example of sequential conditionality would be that of an acorn. Having been planted, it conditions, later in time, the arising of an oak tree. If there was no acorn, it would be impossible for an oak tree to arise. An example of synchronic conditionality would be when sunlight shines through the window onto my desk. If I hold my hand above the desk, the shadow of my hand forms on the surface. There is a conditional relationship between the shadow of my hand and the light on the desk, which is completely synchronic. The sunlight pervades the area that the shadow leaves, and the shadow pervades the area that the sunlight leaves. They affect each other simultaneously. Without going into too much detail, suffice it to say that there are many different ways that such affecting can take place. Classically, there are said to be 24 modes of such conditioning, but to list them all would probably cause more confusion than clarity. For those who are interested, they are gathered in the book of the Abhidhamma called Conditioned Relations, the Patana. It is helpful simply to understand that, with respect to the connections between the 12 links, that is not a matter of uniform linear chain of A directly causes B, B directly causes C, C directly causes D, etc. Rather, it should be understood that the The Pachaya aspect means A affects B in some way, B affects C in some way, and so forth, with these conditional relations being sometimes synchronic, sometimes sequential, sometimes partial, sometimes connascent, in one of those 24 modes. Thus, dependent origination is not a simple linear mechanistic process, but rather one that is complex, nuanced, nonlinear, and responsive. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much for joining me today.